and agencies and mobile resources that are necessary to execute a lot of these grand plans that we'll be talking about. His clients include Publishers Clearinghouse, IDT Telecom, Madison Square Garden, and many others. He's also one of those made members of the Mobile Mafia. He was here back in the day before we called it mobile, but when we used to call it wireless for all those years. Please welcome Jordan Greene.
Just wanted to soak in that one moment there. About a month ago, my wife and I were out to lunch, and we were sitting next to a mother, and she had 3 children with her, which was brave enough in and of itself to take 3 kids out to lunch. But as soon as they ordered, they handed the menus back to the waitress, and all 4 of them pulled out iPhones and started being absorbed in their devices. So you can say what you want about the decay of family values and traditions, but what I saw really was 4 mobile content devices, people consuming content out there in public. And to me, it was the perfect real-life mobile metaphor, which is both for today and tomorrow, the mom and the 3 kids all consuming whatever they were doing. So for me, and I did this math for Steve recently, 2013 marks my 15th year in mobile. Back before it had that cool moniker, before it was mobile, it was cellular, it was wireless, mobile marketing, and I guess we ran out of words, so we just started calling it mobile. But one of the themes that kept coming up on the pre-call with all these guys sitting next to me is that selling mobile services isn't as hard as it used to be, which is companies and brands are now recognizing on their own that they need to have mobile elements one way or another somewhere inside their mixes. For us at MellaMedia, we work with 3 different groups of clients, but one of the primary things we make sure that we do is we build cornerstone strategies for them to make sure that they're basing their decisions on the realities of the marketplace and the realities of their own consumer experiences, which is really important. And throughout, making sure they stay true to who they are. So when the 3 different groups of clients end up being the buy side, which are brands, agencies, and media companies, the sell side, which end up being publishers and developers, and then the investment community, which is the investors who want to invest in the shiniest thing in the room but don't really understand. We end up doing due diligence on their behalf and even targeting. But the important thing that we are able to bring to every client is, by living between these worlds, we see what we call the true pulse of mobile. Our panel today comes from all different experiences and different walks of life. And what I think is most important that we all have here in common is that they have real hands-on experience and understanding of running campaigns, running full accounts for our clients, as well as their own internal divisions. So going down my path here, sitting next to me is, actually, I got Ryan Griffin next to me. So I'm just doing this in out of order because you guys changed up on me. Chris, in this order. I know, it's supposed to be alphabetical. All right. Chris Miller from Draftfcb, Doug Rozen of MXM, which used to be the Hyper Factory, amongst other things. Mark Silber from Joule, Tim Dunn from Roundarch Isobar, and Ryan Griffin from Digitas. So one of my goals today for a panel called It Depends is to get definitive opinions out of all 5 of you. And even better, I'd rather have client examples wherever possible. So you can't use that phrase. I want to keep you away from being able to say those 2 words. And in the spirit of camaraderie, I'm willing to go first in this regard. For me, I view mobile not as one of many digital channels, that being a big word, channel for mobile, for consuming media and advertising. Instead, I really look at it as a grouping of connected personal content consumption devices that these many channels flow through. Now, Tim, when we were talking, you had a very similar kind of point of view. How do you define mobile today?
Well, I don't, basically. That's the key thing. I think I'm probably the first person, and probably the only person who will say, I don't believe in mobile anymore. To the degree that as
you can step down now.
As a mobile guy who started maybe just 1 year after you in '99, I've got to the point where I find it difficult to provide meaningful stuff for clients which isn't multi-channel, and so kind of as of the past month or so, I've kind of taken mobile out of my job title, and I'm now essentially just Director of Digital Strategy, because mobile and the way we think about it around Arch is certainly that everyone has to be a mobile guy. I've been in the country 8 weeks. When I turned up, they said, "What does a director of mobile do?" I was like, well, that's a good point. We have to provide compelling experiences across all devices, and understanding the nuances of mobile is kind of key to that, because half of your content consumption and the rest of it is on the device. But ultimately, you're right in that we start with with some content, and you work that through platforms, which could be Facebook or video or social or messaging or CRM or whatever that is, and then the device layer to that piece of interaction is a nuance which goes underneath it, and that consists of the fine detail of consumer experience and stuff like bandwidth and formatting and notional response channels and stuff which is primarily UX driven. So the mobile discipline for me is largely around UX these days, and digital strategy should govern the whole of the mobile experience.
And your team actually did something relatively inventive, I believe, with HBO, which is you kind of change that equation for device versus content.
Absolutely. So we've done kind of, before I got here, I wish I could claim this one, but the team have done a huge amount of work really defining digital strategy for clients, like HBO, who we're extremely lucky to work with. And this is really around understanding the device relationships. So imagine you can draw a line through time for a Game of Thrones viewer, for example, or boxing or whatever. How do they interact with different devices at different points of their user journey? How do you find out about the boxing? How do you make an appointment to view? How do you remember to view it? What device are you actually going to view it on? How are you going to communicate with your social circle about the boxing, both before, during, after? And how does your mobile, above the line, offline media, tablets and desktop and the rest of it, and email and CRM, all these things work together. So only by understanding this full kind of user journey, which is different for boxing, for Game of Thrones, for all the stuff they do, and mapping this out, can you really get to what the true meaning of mobile is. If you start with a device and say, right, let's how does mobile work for Game of Thrones, then you're not going to come up with the right answer because you're not integrating it with the rest of your approach.
For 2013 in mobile, I think the most incorrectly and overused terms for the year so far: big data, which really sounds more like a Chris Farley Saturday Night Live character that he would play, and responsive design. So, Chris, how would you properly define responsive design in front of a room full of people?
Well, I don't think responsive design has actually been overused. I think it's been underutilized. I mean, we heard Ed earlier talk about how not all of Mondelez's brands have mobile optimized experiences or apps, but they're working to build responsive design sites, and even if it sounded like small and scaling up, I think for us it's the key, and I think to what you were just saying, that it really goes back to behavior. Like, I'm a big nerd. Maybe I can say I started with mobile in the early 90s because I had one of the Motorola brick phones, right, when it was like talk time was measured in minutes, not hours. But the key with that is it's all about behavior. So we talk about behavior first, technology second, because literally mobile can be your panacea, your answer to everything, but that's the device, right? It's the behavior you have to go back to. So I think the key with responsive design is you have to be connected in the behavior in the sense that that's an easy way or easy-ish way, so that when somebody hits your site or your experience on a mobile device or a tablet, that they don't just leave. I mean, we see, for example, with email, that 60% of people, email, first of all, is the number one behavior on mobile, so it's kind of the new savior or sort of the relaunch of email. But number two, it's 60% of people who will go, or maybe it's even higher than that, this is from eMarketer, who go to get an email that's not optimized for mobile, will just delete it. And I think we're seeing similar numbers on sites as well. Like, are you really going to scroll around and and move through there? So I think to the point about maybe responsive design has maybe been overused in the sense of not people focusing on what it means and actually applying it.
I think it's true, and I'm glad you hit on email, because I believe email is having a new renaissance. That every time a new technology to communicate to people came down the road, it was going to be the death of email. But the truth is, we just need to use email in a better way to be able to communicate to people.
It's amazing. Just last night, I mean, there's so many things going on here, and I was talking to a couple of different companies with some VCs last night, and it's like email's the new hot thing all of a sudden. It's like Live Intent and others are all of a sudden like on this like hyperbolic growth because it's sort of been rejuvenated.
So I think, just to add on the responsive design thing, I mean, it's really important that, as Ed and Chris and I think we'd all agree, that everyone should have a mobile optimized experience, web experience. The thing about responsive design is it gets you there, but it doesn't mean you're done. You can't check the box, because you have to understand that there are certain ways, certain behaviors that a consumer might use your mobile device and have an experience on mobile that's going to be different than desktop. And so I think responsive allows you to get in the game. It's absolutely critical for email, but then when you start to look at specific functionality and features on your site, you need to think about beyond responsive to some extent.
But I think it's a cost-benefit analysis, right? It's like, how much do you want to spend for a mobile-only site or an app versus what do people want? So again, we'll say like mobile. When I say mobile first, it's also additive is always easier than subtractive. So I mean, you guys probably did the same thing. You start with this giant site with all this stuff, and then there's stakeholders, and they try to take stuff out to work in mobile, and no one wants to give it up, and it's a crappy responsive design site. Versus what's the key behavior you really need in mobile, and then what do you scale up for broader screen size?
So
Yeah,
Mark,
if I could just
actually, I got one. I got a more direct question straight for you, right?
Okay.
So here, so I'm gonna jump in.
I just want everyone to know I had something to say about responsive design.
It's okay, I'm about
and
to ask
those
you
who
one.
would like to know that, please see me later, because it's really, really interesting. But please, why don't you go ahead with what
Hey,
you were
Mark,
gonna
let me
say.
ask you your specific responsive design question that got lined up for you.
Please.
So I think we all agree that saying starting with responsive design is the wrong starting question. What's the right starting question?
Well, I'm glad you asked that. The right starting question is, what should my mobile strategy be? If everyone in this room could take away one thing today and go back to your offices and remind your colleagues, it's to say, what should our mobile strategy be? Because what responsive design does, people treat it, this is clients and agency people and people who ought to know better for whatever reason, treat it as a panacea. It's like, well, now our site can show in mobile, off to the next thing. And the question, of course, is, what should your site be doing in mobile? Why are you taking all of this nice content you've prepared for some other type of experience and just making it render somewhat properly in mobile? So really the question that I like to start any engagement with is really talking about what your user, what your my client, what your consumer or customer is doing, what you're trying to achieve with them, and let's think about all the ways that mobile can help you do that, in a better way than other media can. So again, every engagement really should start with that word, what is the mobile strategy? And that's strategy with a big capital S, not just like, what's my strategy for reaching these consumers through this particular medium.
Yeah, Mark is the creative guy in the panel.
I'm a creative guy, so I like creative guys don't always talk about the strategy, but that really is the most important.
Oh, no,
Can we
I was just
controversial and
noticing-
say?
What I'm trying to say is I'm a special creative guy because I know the
Can we
word.
be controversial
I can
and say,
spell the word strategy.
Mark, what would be mobile's role within our broader digital strategy? Should surely be the question that you may want to be asking.
Mobile's role within the broader digital strategy is certainly part of it, but I think here's the thing. I think I'm definitely the oldest person on the panel, right? So I remember when all we had was television and print, and then the internet showed up, right? And we didn't ask the question, what's the internet role? We started. It took a while to get there. We started asking, how is this new medium different? How are the behaviors? How are the opportunities different than what we had in the past? And we all made the mistake of taking our company brochure and putting it on the web, or organizing our website to look just like our company org chart. And it took a while to figure out what the web is good for. Fast forward 20 years, and now we've got mobile. And people are starting to still see it as like, well, it's the web on tiny little screens. It's my email, just like you were saying, but it's on a small screen. And that's not untrue, but that's certainly not the whole story. So I don't think that mobile personally is just part, it's related to my digital strategy. It's also related to my non-digital strategies, my broadcast strategy and my consumer path to purchase and all kinds of other things I think about. But I think of that, you have to start by asking, what should my mobile strategy be? How does it tie into the other stuff that we're doing?
So in light of this, so now we've got all these different, both digital and non-digital platforms. I'm going to ask the softball question.
Oh, really?
Is there enough scale in mobile?
One of these guys.
Yeah, and anybody
media
but
title
Mark is
guys
allowed
should
to talk
answer.
now. Yeah.
I'll take that one. I think, so the hardest and most challenging thing about mobile is obviously just the fragmentation of time, right? Like, I think we're used to kind of measuring media experiences, more in hours, stationary visits, longer term exposures, whereas mobile is really about how do you aggregate these slivers of kind of engagement over time, right? And how do you look at marketing in that moment? How do you deliver something that is a little bit unique, has utility, has entertainment value, isn't necessarily fully interruptive, but does align both, I think, from a user interface. A lot of the design stuff we're talking about, that's user interface stuff, but I think you got to talk about user experience, kind of as the other half of that coin, and you want to deliver something that really is in line with both. So scale, again, it can be difficult. I mean, one of the examples I can share a little bit later is an activation we did for the M&M's brand, and we were like, again, it's a CPG, so we're thinking, scale and reach is important. And we went right to the gaming category, right? When you think about mobile content, it's about games. They dominate the App Store, and we were able to find some really, really good solutions there. I think you've kind of got probably a handful of tentpole mobile standalone properties out there, maybe 5 to 10. You can probably count them, on two hands. But outside of that, it's more about aggregated plays, I think, and using the networks and depending again on the role that you actually define, whether it's a standalone mobile strategy or something that's part of a larger digital piece. And I tend to kind of agree that we're at Digitas thinking about mobile's role in the larger digital kind of story and approach, more so than siloing it out. But yeah, I think there is. You just have to be very clear, right, with clients in terms of managing their expectations and their goals and what they're going to get at. And then you just have to think about the right experience for your brand.
So 5 to 10 platforms plus some other stuff. You feel like you can get enough scale at these devices now?
I think so, and certainly the networks help with that.
I think scale's it doesn't matter. Like, why are we? When you talk about scale? Last year more phones were sold than desktops. Unless you're nearly dead or newly born, you have a device. Time spent's going up. I think so. That's why I think scale is like, well, relative to what, right? I think if you compare it to your point about television and print and other media that's been around a while, it's kind of apples to apples to say, well, can I get the same reach as I can on TV? Well, but what are you trying to accomplish in mobile? Which it goes back to, I think, to what you're saying. So I think it's kind of an Occam's razor. It's a trap to fall into to say, is there enough scale? Because how do you answer that? I think exactly.
I think it's more about scale for advertisers and marketers.
I'm agreeing with you. I'm just disagreeing with him asking the question.
But I think now I'm defending Jordan. Now I'm defending. I think
my job as the moderator is to provoke little things out of you,
Exactly,
especially
right.
based on the stuff you tell me ahead of time. So I kind of set you up on that one a little.
I think part of the thing is it's not just about media. I mean, I know that this is sort of a media-driven conference, and there's probably a lot of people who work in media in some form. So some of my best friends work in media, don't get me wrong. But I think if we start by thinking of mobile as a place, just another medium where I can put advertising, again, I think we miss sort of the bigger possibilities of what mobile can do. So in that respect, scale also, to me, doesn't matter that much. If I have a product with only 1 million consumers and I can reach them through mobile, it doesn't have to be through mobile advertising. Mobile advertising might be used to publicize some app or other experience that I've created. But to me, the important thing is thinking of it like, if it's not simply media, what can I do with mobile? What is the experience?
I think the answer to the question might be there's scale there if you want it. And that really dials into what you're saying.
Need it.
Exactly. If you look at how brands are built, essentially, when you launch a brand new brand, or if a brand is, your example is brilliant from a CPG perspective, you need to reach scale because the only way you shift units in CPG is by reach and awareness, right? So mobile can kind of do that. But if you go towards more, as you progress up, imagine how a brand is built. You've got kind of low awareness here, and you've got kind of high loyalty up here. The journey that a brand has and the consumer has is along, is the relationship. So you start, but you just need to make a hell of a lot of people aware that this thing exists, because you as an individual only have room in your heart for like 5 or 6 brands that you actually care about in any way. Then you need to trigger some kind of purchase, which is where you have less scale, but you have stuff like geofencing and all of that, which is concentrated around the point of purchase, shelf activation, and so on. Then you can build through content, through for say a vodka, you get into the kind of recipes and how to serve and how to socialize it, and then right at the top you've got stuff like loyalty. And you've got co-creation and the stuff that only people like. I've done a lot of work with Guinness in Ireland, for example, and that's a loyal market, right? And the Diet Cokes of this world, who can actually do this kind of top-end co-creation stuff where few people get involved, but the advocacy that you get from their involvement through the mobile channel is immense. And so there's scale if you want it at the bottom end, and there's depth if you want it at the top end. And mobile is a brilliant kind of device because, I didn't say channel, you notice. It's a brilliant device because it enables all of those different parts of how brands are built to be executed.
I think the harder thing to scale is not the consumer, but actually the content that the consumer is going to require. So if you think about what mobile's doing and how we're looking at it from a content-centric perspective, is really trying to create these experiences that have a lot of snackable components to it. Is it better to have 10 tweets consumed in an appropriate manner versus a 2-minute desktop web session? You know, the challenge in trying to figure that out is how do you manage all the content that's now required in today's hyper-connected world? And I think that's the harder thing to scale. That puts a lot of pressure on the clients, puts a lot of pressure on the agencies, and to some extent, if you don't get it right, you know, you risk alienating the trust of the consumer right away because you're going to bombard them.
I mean, at the base of all of this is what the business goals of the client are, and ultimately what the expectations of that particular execution or tactic is.
Well,
Now, you guys, I'm going to jump in for a second. He had a pretty good example of the stuff that you guys did with Taco Bell.
Sure.
They had specific goals that they wanted and how you guys went about it.
And we're getting close to lunchtime. There's a Taco Bell just a few blocks away. If anyone's like, you know, looking out for something to do. So the goal that Taco Bell really focuses around is owning mealtime moments. And, you know, what's a mealtime moment? Sounds pretty straightforward, right? But it's that 10 or 15 minutes when, you know, you're thinking, what do I want to eat? What do I have at home? I've had a long day. I don't want to cook. It'd be nice if we could just stop and grab something. And, you know, interruption, you know, really is a key part of that, you know, I think at the end of the day. And I think, you know, when we think about mealtime, I'm not going to say you should go to Taco Bell for breakfast. I'm going to leave that one out. But, you know, lunch, obviously, cover it pretty well with desktop. But, you know, mobile plays a critical role for dinner time and late night, which is, you know, obviously a very big part of their business as well. So one of the things, one of the companies that we worked with is a company called Waze, which has been, you know, in the news a little bit from the standpoint of some acquisition rumors. But we did a first-to-market integration with them that was really focused on, you know, getting individuals, you know, during drive time after work, right? Again, they've had a long day and they're trying to sort through what they're going to do for themselves or their families or whatever it might be. And we dropped, you know, their consulting, you know, the Waze app, which is a social kind of GPS mapping application for those that might not be familiar. Helps you kind of get crowdsourced directions, perhaps a better route to where you're going based on accidents or delays or anything like that. It's cool. I encourage you to check it out. But what we did, we just kind of dropped in little Taco Bell pins showing like nearby locations, incentivized with offers to, you know, stop by. All that stuff was time bound, you know, targeted to the right context, obviously, for the user. We also did some search term conquesting. So other grocery stores, other QSRs, you know, we again served up that Taco Bell messaging, you know, and some of those offers as well. Again, just to kind of get them to click in that, you know, this mealtime moment, I'm going to opt for Taco Bell. And, you know, I think it's, when you think about activations like that, for me, one of the key parts is like think about some of the unique assets that you have for your brands and think about some of the unique capabilities of the mobile space. And I think as an industry, if we're able to operate at that intersection and things that we go to market with, we're going to be in a pretty good place overall.
Doug, I didn't mean to cut you off if you had a thought there.
No, I forgot.
No, that's okay.
I agree.
And actually, my question that I would go back to you on is you guys started working with a casino client recently.
Yeah.
And what I think is interesting is because where we are at this point in mobile, you guys come in and they've got all these new terms that they like throwing around, going back to responsive design and other things like that. And then they've got their half-baked tactics that they've done over time. Now you need to come in, first and foremost, do you do cleanup first before you get to new ideas and concepts?
Well, I wouldn't call it cleanup.
That's why I called it cleanup.
You called it cleanup, especially if the client is watching on the live stream. No, I think the important thing is, I think to what we said before, there's been a lot of experimentation in mobile. Some of it's right, some of it's wrong. Some of it's helped because you can learn from what you didn't do right. In this client in particular, we've had to come in and simultaneously deal with some SMS issues while defining an overall strategy, while at the same time delivering some initial app needs for their business that they require. So it's almost you have to put 3 teams to some extent on them in order to get the immediate needs taken care of and start to build and link that into the strategy development work, while then we're partnering with their IT group on some things that are going to be tied into the apps. Because for this client in particular, we're looking at the apps to play a really robust loyalty experience. So when you're on property and walking through the casino, there's a lot of opportunities based on your profile that will be unlocked either from a geolocation standpoint, from a gaming and database CRM standpoint. Imagine getting things comped through your phone instead of the guy coming over. Stuff like that.
Out of curiosity, when your data team goes digging in, what are some of the challenges that they did find with cleaning up that SMS program?
I mean, there's the basics around just opt-ins, having clear and consistent opt-ins, understanding, more beyond just, having the SMS number, because there is so much more data that can be provided when, doing SMS. And they were doing a lot of just simple inbound stuff, so it's nothing complex. But if you don't start right, you're going to have a lot of challenge downstream because, it's not like you're going to want to go out and get these consumers to re-sign up and re-opt in and all of this. So it's real important to have, the understanding of how are you going to engage these consumers downstream as you're asking them for their permission to participate now.
So we have an opportunity at this juncture to start doing stuff the right way going forward, right? So it's less expensive for our
I
clients.
hope so.
Yeah.
Starting now.
Exactly right now. From a tracking standpoint, I mean, the expectations of clients when they come from the PC world into the mobile world is they expect that they're going to have exactly the type of tracking mechanisms and attribution models that they can apply because they've been doing it for the last 10 or 15 years. What are some of the challenges that you guys run into in trying to explain to clients that it's not quite the same thing? The mobile world is digital but slightly askew.
Well, what I find, again, the creative guy shouldn't answer the data question, but let me tell you the way it looks to me is that you're right, the clients have the same expectations for that kind of stuff. I see that there's more data available. There's more just sheer quantity of data that can be layered into something. What I find is sort of missing, what I keep trying to bring it back to is, what does any of this tell us? What's the insight that we're getting out of this? I don't just want to know that this many people came or this many people opened it up. That's great starter point information. But I think that part of what's happened with data in general is that we talk so much about the stuff we see or we know, but we don't really have some kind of learning on top of that. And I don't mean we, I mean the industry in general. What I'd like to see is all of us try to, bring it more to like, here's an insight we got. Everyone who does this also does that and that. I can work with that so that the next rev of this, this particular experience is going to be better because of that.
Yeah, I mean, we're a constantly dissatisfied industry to that point. Like we feel we need to jump onto the next thing before we finish this thing to some extent. And there's a lot of discussion around attribution models and how do we know if somebody came into a retail environment, was it the desktop, the mobile, the print, the TV? All of that's tremendously important, but right now it's making sure more than anything that you can prove the ROI in mobile, in desktop, in the channels that you're doing, versus trying to figure out how to connect it all together, because you might be stitching things together that don't deserve to be connected. And you might have issues on desktop that as soon as you try to figure out the attribution between desktop and mobile, it's going to actually decrease the ROI of mobile.
It's interesting. Our window of dissatisfaction is so short now that there were a couple months ago, Gmail. A lot of us use Gmail, and we use it on our iPhones, we use it on our iPads, and it stopped working for a couple hours. The complaints that went across Twitter, we almost broke the internet. Okay, we need to stop doing that. But Gmail, they fixed it. And the question is, again, we think now. I'm at the point where it's an overly beaten moniker of mobile first, where I think, and it was a common theme amongst talking to all of you, that it really is about user behavior first. Mm-hmm. And what I really liked, actually, Chris, you guys had a good example about you were running with a milk campaign. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, first, so you're killing me with Taco Bell, because that used to be our client, and now Digitas has it. But we did launch the DLT, the Doritos Locos Tacos, and you guys took it over with Cool Ranch. Which are awesome, by the way.
Again, Penn Station, a couple blocks away, not far.
No, I think the thing with milk, it's like to your point about mobile first or behavior first. I mean, it's got to be behavior first. And we, for example, just to give you some somewhat secret sauce, we worked with McKinsey a few years ago when they developed the consumer decision journey, and it's a really great model to use, especially as it relates to mobile, because it starts with a trigger moment. It's what it lets you define the barriers to how somebody moves to purchase, and then on to a loyalty loop, and then repurchase. So it's a great tool to sort of say where in that is the consumer behavior and what's blocking them from moving forward. So in the case of milk, so we did the milk mustache work. But one of our targets were moms. And moms tend to consume milk, but outside of home, and it's usually through coffee, which is usually a latte or cappuccino or something like that, at Starbucks, right? Starbucks, #1 milk purchaser and consumer or customer. So what we've found just through some research is moms like their lattes, they just think it's too difficult or too hard to work at home. And so we paired together, and this is where I think as Draftfcb, we can bring together mass media, shopper and retail, and mobile kind of because that connected thread all the way through. So with mass, we could get some messages out there. In store, we used QR codes to kind of bring the messaging to life with a click through. And again, this is my responsibility. I ask if anybody who uses QR codes, please make the juice worth the squeeze, otherwise it kill all of us. Because if a consumer clicks through and it's a bad experience, then they're much less likely to use that in the future. And there's been enough of that. So we created this experience where it was all about how easy it is to make a latte at home, essentially, coffee and milk, and you don't have to really use espresso, and Bob's your uncle. So we saw this huge lift actually in milk consumption and milk purchase. So again, it was sort of using mobile, but in that right place, right time moment to connect those pieces together, which I think we wouldn't have gotten had we not understand, one, from a behavior piece, do moms, do they like it, do they not, how are they making their purchase, or when are they making their consumption, and then how do we hit them at those unique points, both at purchase and then here at home, here's the video that shows you how to make it as well.
I'm going to open up to questions, by the way. Otherwise, I'll just keep going all day. If anybody's got, just raise your hand. But what I loved about the milk example is, at its very core, it's very straightforward. Your goal is to sell more milk to moms. Okay? I'm sure Starbucks is complaining you guys are putting a huge dent in their business, or we're just consuming more coffee.
I'd like to think so.
Yeah.
The interesting thing about that example is also when you're looking at, how you've actually, that is a classic ad man insight through to execution, which is absolutely brilliant. What I think mobile adds to that is sometimes this kind of layer of context and the kind of unique experience that you can get to that. So I think the funniest thing that I've ever done kind of using that is something that we did for Bud Ice in Ireland, and some of you have been there. No, it doesn't get very hot, right? But Bud Ice is clearly something you drink when it's hot. So the kind of classic insight path that we took from there was to relate these two things. And so what we're able to do, but to use the mobile context, was to build kind of an app which, the hotter the day, the less you pay for your bud. So if it got up to 20 degrees or something like that, then, you get a message.
Celsius, not Fahrenheit.
Yeah. I never know what.
Isn't that the opposite of that Coke machine a couple of years ago, that as the temperature went up, the price would go up? They had that for a while, and then they had to remove that.
That's not very nice, is it?
Quickly from the market.
Really, the other way around. So the hotter it gets, the hotter the day, the less you pay. And by just thinking about the mobile, journey, right? These guys are just walking around Ireland, and suddenly they get this thing, and it's getting quite hot, and suddenly Bud's only €1, which is fantastic. And then the thing comes to your phone, you go straight into the bar and present it, and then off you go. So that's just kind of an example of how you can place just a slight edge of mobile context, just as you've done for the milk, onto that kind of journey.
And I'm sorry.
I was just going to say, I think exactly what you're bringing up, that the notion of context, and then the important thing of putting that context with the content, and how, going back to your first question, Jordan, of what is mobile, it is about taking advantage of now the context and content coming together, that I think is truly remarkable. How we can now market to somebody who's standing in a store location, that gives us the context, the situational understanding to deliver the right type of content to drive a basic marketing, decision.
That's I think what's interesting, because all of us in this room, if I asked you how many of you hate advertising, you would actually raise your hands if you were being honest. Because if somebody sends you if someone sends you a message that's not appealing to you, not interesting to you, you don't like that. It was a few years ago, when he was alive, that Steve Jobs said mobile ads suck, right? And then he rolled out iAd, and that was supposed to be the solution. But he didn't quite, get it the whole way, because what makes mobile interesting, what makes mobile marketing experiences potentially interesting, is our ability to deliver relevance. That's what people want. They want something that is relevant is a funny word, relevant and delivers value and is meaningful to them. Mobile gives us more ways to do that with any given individual than any other medium. That's what makes this advertising or marketing, however you want to think of it, in this medium interesting.
I think, that's the key. Like, the really good mobile work is it's relevant, it's contextual, it brings the content, at the right place, and it taps into just a key behavior. I'm on the mobile jury for Cannes, and so I've been doing some of the prejudging. And some of the work that you see internationally is just amazing. It's just really, really smart stuff. So it's also a great thing as you look for inspiration, because there's just a lot of great stuff that's out there. Both through what OMA publishes, but also looking at Contagious Magazine and others. There's just some cool stuff. And like, one of the things I saw was this Japanese energy drink company, and I can't remember the name now, but essentially they recognize that Japanese salarymen, they work hard, they play hard, they're going home, on the train after being up for 20 hours, and they fall over and fall asleep on somebody. So isn't that annoying when somebody does that to you? Or in Japanese culture, that's not so good to sort of invade that personal space. So they're like, we can use the accelerometer. So there's this app that basically you turn it on, put it in your pocket, and if it goes past a tipping point, it starts buzzing and waking you up and reminds you should have this energy drink, Ginkgo-san or whatever, to stay awake. It's just again a great context and piece to it. So things like that, I think, are just there's, to your point, just so dead simple when you see them at the end, but what leads into it, that insight, in context and behavior and stuff, just makes it a win.
I think I'd submit that it's at the end of the day, we talk a lot about the smaller screen and the limitations. I think it's the ultimate storytelling device, because the bar is so high on creating, like from insight through to execution, the bar is so high on how you bring these experiences to life and connect in that very unique and differentiated way. When you do it right, it's the most powerful thing there is, irrespective of the size of the screen or the length of the exposure or any of the other kind of more traditional, I think, marketing and media metrics that we look at. It's just a powerful, powerful thing.
Let me say something everyone's going to agree with. Can we all say we're thoroughly sick of people saying, "Oh, it's a small screen, though"? Right? Can we just say that? It's a premium screen, right? Are we happy with that? That's much better.
But here's the thing. When we design TV campaigns, we don't design it based on the size of the television.
Nope.
So why, when we design mobile, do we... we need to be mindful of the screen size, but it's not about it being a screen size. It goes back to that behavior. And it goes back to the story that we're trying to explain and the experience that we're trying to get out of the consumer there. So I think we do spend, as an industry and as agencies and all of us, spend too much time talking about the OS and the device and not about mobility being about the consumer and the tendencies and behaviors like we've been talking about.
It's a complete cultural shift. Like that's all it is. At the end of the day, when you think about mobility, and it just again has the ability to transform what brands can do. So.
Steve's got a microphone if you have questions, but I want to take, actually, while he's doing that, the word mobility I want to actually address a little bit. Because we think about these mobile phones, and maybe for now, that word is not even correct anymore, mobile. The vast majority of content is not being consumed in a mobile environment. The carriers have us trained like lapdogs, where we know we will not consume video out in the world across carrier networks because they'll ding us with a bill at the end of the month. Average consumer is consuming less than 1 gigabyte of data on their phone via carrier networks, and over 50 gigabytes of data in their house, which obviously has other devices attached to it. But as we're getting trained this way, are there opportunities to target people when they're stationary but using these smaller devices?
Well, certainly like these second screen type opportunities. I mean, when you're home, we know that, I don't know the exact number, but 80% of people, at times are using their mobile devices to do something relevant to what they're watching on the TV. And not just mobile, by the way. I don't know if we've even mentioned the word tablet here, but, tablets are not just computers and they're not just big phones. They're also associated with their own set of behaviors and expectations and ways to deliver relevance. And that's something that people are certainly using in the home as a second screen opportunity, too. So that's, another way to think about it is just to figure out how do I add value to this thing that's perhaps on television that now I can extend the experience to. That's actually something we do. We do all the sponsorships for AT&T, like American Idol and Dancing with the Stars. AT&T 12 years ago taught America how to text so they could text in their vote. So now when you text in your vote, you get back a bounce back message and it takes you to a web-based, a mobile web experience. We're extending that out for next year where there'll be sort of tablet components to that as well. So we're sort of helping AT&T teach people new behaviors, which is kind of like, an understanding that my TV and my phone are not two distinct things. They're actually related, and I might want to use one of them more often.
And in there is the perfect irony. You're teaching the mobile carrier how to interact with
No,
people.
I didn't mean to say we're teaching AT&T. AT&T is teaching its consumers. We do marketing for AT&T, and maybe we taught them a thing or two over time. But no. AT&T taught consumers about mobile long ago. I can see the big headline, Mark Silber claims Joule taught AT&T how to use mobile. Can start distributing resumes now.
Mark, I used to work for Telefonica in Europe. It's okay to say that. You have to do it. It's,
but teach. I mean, that's what AT&T believes they are doing. Again, I wasn't working with them 12 years ago, but the reason there's texting, the reason they've sponsored that program for 12 years is that getting people to text was something that they, over time figured people would learn to do. Well, everybody knows how to text now, and it's, we've moved gradually beyond that to other mobile experiences also connected to this program. As the millions of you who I know watched American Idol just this last season already know, that was already part of the program through Twitter and other ways of engaging users using mobile.
Although if you read the news, it sounds like not millions, but hundreds of thousands of people were watching.
Yes, I was being funny there, but yes, that has nothing. Mobile can't solve all your problems, man. Okay.
Chris, you had a thought?
Well, I was just going to say, I think, to your point about mobility, I think it's less about like I am mobile and we're certainly walking around, but it's more about like snackable and quick in and quick out, and so not creating things that like I need to spend 20 minutes on my small screen, because just again, reality, that's where other screens are going to start to usurp because it's easier to do that. Whether they're connected screens or not. So to me, it's more about whether somebody's like, no one's going to walk across, well, probably not walk across the street with a tablet in their hand, but they are going to do that with a phone in their hand. Or they're sitting at the couch and the phone's sort of a quick lean forward, where a tablet's a longer lean back. So to me, it's more about that, how we think about the experience. The other piece is sort of around utility of making it. And it's something we hadn't talked about, but making it something that's either a time saver or a time waster. So, and time wasters are okay, right? They don't have to just be games. It can be, again, that snackable piece. So is it a utility that helps me save time? Is it a utility that helps me kill time? That's another way to sort of look at redefining mobility, but sort of where mobile can play that role.
Yeah, we talk about that as putting the fun in functional. That, the best mobile experiences need that utility and that functional aspect, but at the same time, you need that brand experience. It can't be one way or the other. It's got to be a perfect balance between the two to really be that compelling experience. If it's so much of a brand or creative idea without that function, you might get one interaction, but you're not going to get that overall utility downstream.
Okay, we have to wrap this up, but I'm willing to give each person one sentence as a final parting thought, starting at the end.
Putting the fun in functional is good, but how about putting the mo in mobile? I don't know what it means, but I like it. Was that the parting thought? I've already given them all my thoughts. Please, I cede my time to the panel.
How do I follow that? No. Why do I follow that? No, just don't think about mobile first, think about strategy first.
I said that before.
Before you think about strategy, think about behavior, because that's what's going to drive your strategy.
And before you think about it,
I was trying to get 2 lines down.
yeah, you'd be in trouble after that. Yeah, I'm sorry that we didn't do all the Boyz II Men numbers that you were expecting when we came up.
I think I would just say, I mean, just to go back to kind of some of the marketing and media stuff, I mean, focus on telling great stories around experiences, not click-through rates on rectangles.
And I would just like to thank all 5 of them for being relatively good sports and putting up fights with each other along the way. Thank you. We'll be outside if anybody wants to catch up.